be mafkir the kli. You call up a group of three people or three different people at the same time, and basically say that you're making your kli ownerless. These three people should not be related to you nor to one another. And in this sense, the kli is now ownerless. And you have to have in mind not to re-own it, not to take possession again of the kli. But the problem with this approach is that many of the Nosei Kalim say that automatically over time, the kli goes back into your rishus. So you will again become owner at some point in time down the pike. So again, I think the best thing to do is if you can, if you can't tovel it in a ocean or a mikvah or a lake, then use Mechon Somet's method. I really do believe that is the best method. And they walk. The site is both in English, and they also have the Hebrew and English site for this. I want to talk about, are there any questions before we move on to preparing food for Pesach? Okay, so one of the questions that people have been raising is that when they prepare food for Pesach or buy food for Pesach, is there a possibility, if they're, for some reason, they're really running low on supplies or they can't get a hold of food, can they use what's known as bittul b'shishim for any traces of chametz that might exist in some foods? Now, obviously, we would never do this in a regular year, but there is a Pesach that's brought down in the Mechaber and in the Ramah that in the mixture that is known as lach belach. A lach belach mixture is liquid mixtures. Okay, specifically liquid mixtures. What I'm about to say does not apply to yavesh b'yavesh, to dry mixtures, but in liquid mixtures that occur prior to Pesach, because on Pesach chametz is eino batel afilu be'elef. Just when we say a mashu, a little bit of chametz creates a problem. But the din is, if the chametz was mixed together in a liquid mixture prior to Pesach, it is batel b'shishim, and then there becomes the question: do you say it's choser v'niur, that somehow it comes back to the chametz? For some reason, there is some feedback. I don't know does anyone hear the feedback?
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe someone's microphone is not muted.
Yeah, can I ask everyone again to just mute your microphone if you're not muted? Everyone who's not muted, just to mute. Great, thank you.
So basically, the question is, even if the chametz is batel prior to Pesach in a lach balach, in a liquid mixture, do you say that it's choser v'niur on Pesach, that somehow the chametz comes back to life on Pesach? It's a machlokes rishonim. The Rambam says it does, but the Rosh says it does not, and the Mechaber and the Ramah paskin that it does not come back to life, and once it's been batel prior to Pesach, it's batel. Again, it's not something that we would like to utilize lechatchila for normal years, but in this year, if there really is a great need, it is something that can be considered. The only complicating factor here is that sometimes to be batel b'shishim, if there's a trace amount of chametz, but that chametz, that trace amount is very powerful. For example, it's what's known as a milta avidilatayma. It's made to give a lot of taste, powerful taste, or it's a davar hamaimed. It's something that gives body in a significant sense to the item. Then it's very possible that it will not be batel. And so therefore it's important to contact the manufacturer, or at least a mashgiach, to find out a little bit more about the particular item.
I do. I'm not sure.
I hear there's somebody, not sure. Oh, shim. I think, yeah, oh, there we go. Okay, it's close, yeah. Okay. Now, any questions about this issue of bittul or preparing food? Okay. The next question I want to deal with that people have asked a lot relates to the siyum of Tanit for Tanit Bechorot. Anyone who's a Bechor knows that usually on Erev Pesach one would have to fast unless they attend a siyum. Today, if a person makes their own siyum, fine. A siyum means a siyum on a seder of Mishnayos, like for example Seder Zroim or Seder Nezikim, the whole seder, any of the Shisha Sidri Mishnah. It can't be a Masechet of Mishnayos. It could be a Masechet of Gemara, but it can't be just a parsha. If you want to make a siyum on Tanakh, something like that. But otherwise we don't call that a siyum if it's not a significant siyum. So some people are making their own siyumim. Fine. Can one join up with that siyum over the phone or through Zoom or what have you? And the answer is, and this is a psak from Rav Schechter and Rabbi Willig and other Gedolei Yisrael, and this is what people are going to do. This is fully accepted by Gedolei Yisrael, that it can be done through the phone or through Zoom or the like. So it can't be something that's been recorded and you're just listening to it as a recording. It should be live. You're listening to it real time, and this way you've joined in the great simcha of this person's siyum. No kaddish is recited because we're not mitzaref over Zoom in that sense, but the person could say the hadron, and then that will count as the siyum. Some people have even suggested they have online like a list of recordings where you can finish a mesechet, very, very quickly. I mean, when I say very quickly, I mean like in 3.5 hours. You can finish a mesechet. So you can do something like that. On YUTorah.org, they have people like that. For example, Rav Mordechai Tortzina has something like that. If you want to make your own siyum. Any questions about the siyum? Of course, right after that siyum, one should eat and enjoy some food right away to indicate their starfut, they're joining up in the simcha of that person.
Do you know of anywhere where there's a list of the siyumim, particularly in the U.S.?
I don't know where. I mean, assume online it'll come up. I assume you'll be able to find that.
Okay, thanks.
Now, I want to talk about mechirat chametz. Again, normally when people sell their chametz, they go to the Rav. The Rav doesn't buy your chametz. You make the Rav your shaliach, your agent, and he sells it to a non-Jew. Now what happens over here today is that we can't go to the Rav to make him the shliach in the physical sense, but we can do it online. There are online sales going all over in Eretz Yisrael and all over the world, and that is perfectly fine. Basically, what you're doing is that you're making the Rav there as the shaliach, and they will sell it to the non-Jew. What's important is that you should look for terminology in that website that you're completely serious about this. It will say that. That's what almost all wording will exist that way. That you're very serious about making the Rav your shliach and about the sale. But that's all built in typically into these websites. And in this way, you can sell your chametz. Now, what really, so one has to remember to do it this way. But one of the things that people have asked a lot about this year is that there are a number of people who sell all their chametz, whether it's chametz gamor or tarovis chametz or chametz nukshe, whether it's real chametz or ruined chametz. But some people do not. Some people only sell ruined chametz or mixtures of chametz, but they won't sell chametz gamor. Now, this year, because there are concerns for shortages, perhaps, of food, if one feels that they need to be lenient, they may be lenient in this matter, even if they previously weren't, and they do not have to make a hataras nedarim. Poskim have mentioned across the board, and this goes way back to the Dagel Mervava and the Shach, that when there is a unique situation, it's not that you're changing your minhag. It's just you're acting differently because of unique and odd circumstances, and it's understood that you go back to your original minhag. So you're not being matir. You don't have to be matir neder. People have also asked, and this has occurred to whether people who are talmidim or talmidot, that they had to leave their dormitories very quickly and they didn't have a chance to remove their chametz, or people who have offices and didn't have a chance to go back to their offices to remove their chametz. What do they do about the chametz in their dorms or in their offices? And the halacha is that you can sell that chametz together along with the chametz that you're selling from your home. That is okay. You can include it together with the chametz that you're selling in your home. If you were only selling that chametz, that could be a question, but make sure if you're selling it from the chametz of your home, then you can sell that chametz along with it. So you have to indicate in the shtar mechira online where that you're selling the chametz in those locations as well. One last thing about mechiras chametz, and then move on, and that is people who were in Eretz Yisrael, and then like talmidim of mine, and they had to leave very quickly, so they have chametz in Eretz Yisrael. Their chametz is going to be chametz earlier in Eretz Yisrael, Pesach earlier before it is in Chutz La'aretz. So even though really most poskim say that you go where the person is, so if the person is in, let's say, the United States, and it is already Pesach in Eretz Yisrael, 7 hours before this person's Pesach. Nevertheless, some poskim understand that you should sell the chametz earlier, and so you should use a shtar that will sell the chametz even earlier. It's known as the shtar of Yud Gimel, Mechiras Yud Gimel, meaning it's sold a little bit earlier to accommodate people who've done something like that. Are there any questions on this topic? Okay, I want to discuss now bedikat and biur chametz. First of all, the way the biur chametz is going to let's start with bedikat chametz. One should have their house fully clean, and one should be able to do a proper bedikat chametz as usual. But if for some reason someone cannot, they're not feeling well, or they're in makom muvudad, or maybe just the way people are interacting doesn't allow for a full and super careful bedikat chametz as usual, I want to call your attention to the following halacha. The prohibition on Pesach of chametz occurs on many levels. Number one, obviously we can't eat chametz, and that's even the smallest traces of chametz. But in terms of the concern for owning chametz, possessing chametz, the Isser Bal Yiro Bal Yimatzeh, so for that purpose, the halacha is really that only if your chametz is the size of a kazayas, it's the size of an olive. But any chametz that's less than the size of an olive is technically not under the prohibition of Bal Yiro Bal Yimatzeh. And therefore, if it's necessary, one could rely on this and do they should do a careful check, but careful to remove, chametz that's the size of a kazayas or more. But less than that, perhaps they could, as I said, only under pressing circumstances, they can rely on not doing that. There are poskim who insist that even if it's less than the size of a kazayit, it's still a problem if it's edible to a human being. If a human being would eat it, then it's still a problem. But if it's chametz that's been on the floor for a while, or it's been in the corner, it's probably it's full of dust, or it's stale, and a person typically would not eat it. So again, that's a leniency that one could rely on. In terms of burning chametz, normally we go to a collective burning of chametz. Obviously, that's not going to happen this year. Halavai that it can, but if things change, one should not go to any public burning of chametz. Even in the privacy of one's garden, it is highly suggested not to do that for a number of reasons. Very often people don't do it well. It's uncontrolled. It's just not something that should be done. It draws the attentions of neighbors, depending where you're living. Non-Jews could get very upset if you're living in such an area. It's not recommended. What one should do is take the chametz that you've collected from the bedikat chametz the night before, and the next morning, before the zman of the biur, make sure that you take the chametz, and instead of what you would have gone and burnt it, the zman of burning chametz, you should instead take it, put it in small pieces, and flush it down the toilet in small pieces. This is considered like throwing it into the yam, like zorik liyam, and you just keep flushing. You don't want the food to stuff up the toilet either. You don't want to have that problem right before Pesach. So do it in small amounts, and you'll just have to use a little bit more water, but in that way, flush the chametz away. Alternatively, one can take the chametz into a public and ownerless area, and crumble it and scatter it into the wind, and that's also considered getting rid of the chametz. Any questions on this topic?
Yeah, is it possible just to put the economica on the food, on the bread, it makes it inedible, and is that considered to be enough?
It's not considered the same as the classic destruction of sending it away, but it could be it could be enough. But I would strongly suggest either flushing it or sending it and making it into an ownerless area. But it could be economica. If the other choices I mentioned are not possible, then I guess that would be the last choice, the last option.
Rav Schreiber, can I ask a question about if you have chametz that you own in Chutz La'aretz, where they're going to have a second day Yom Tov, and obviously you don't want that chametz back if you've sold it in Israel, can you be makner it to someone on your behalf? How do you do that? If it's in my parents' house, how do you deal with that chametz?
Right, that's a very good question. That's a really good question. I would say, I mean, you can. What we say usually when you do a kinyan is that the person who's going to do the purchase would do the kinyan or the gift. If you're on the phone with them and you tell them pick it up and take it as a gift, and they pick it up, it becomes theirs. So that's what I would say. That would be the right way to do it. Alternatively, if you want, there are some shtarot of mechirat chametz that would allow you to delay the repurchasing of your chametz, so that the chametz will come back to you a day later, here in Eretz Yisrael. So
that's for all your chametz. I assume you can't specify which comes back to you and which doesn't.
Yes. Well, you could. I think you could. You probably could do that. I think it probably mentions in that shtar that type of chametz.
So what's preferable?
You could do either one. Either one's fine. Either one's. But if it's chametz gamur, it's chametz gamur. It's no, either one's fine. This year, either one's fine.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Rav Schreiber?
Yes.
I was just wondering, how is the actual mechira to the non-Jew being handled this year by the rabbinut if people are not allowed to meet with each other?
Yes, that's it's a good question. Essentially, what's going to happen over there is I assume that they will somehow either do it online again using the sales that the methodology that I mentioned. They'll use the kinyan sudar. They'll sign. They'll do all sorts of of those things. Alternatively, maybe they'll meet, but again from a great distance. That's the other way. I'm not 100% sure today what they're going to do in different places, but I imagine it's going to be one of those two choices. Now, what I'd like to talk about is, if there are no more questions about the bedika and biur of chametz, I want to talk about the type of matzah that people will buy this year. Some people like handmade matzah, some people like machine-made matzah, and I would like to say that that both have advantages. And the advantages, for example, of handmade matzah are, number one, the din of lishma, that matzah is supposed to be made l'shem mitzvahs matzah. This is brought down in the Gemara, and basically, if you're doing it by hand and it's direct, that's obvious that you can do this. To do l'shem mitzvahs matzah over a machine by pressing a button is something that was hotly debated for a number of centuries already, and is basically considered acceptable today. We do assume that it works. Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, Rabbi Soloveitchik, also held this way. Rabbi Soloveitchik, in fact, preferred machine-made matzahs. But for example, the question of lishma definitely is an advantage in the handmade matzah. Moreover, the sense, I guess, of authenticity, or sometimes people like the taste better. On the other hand, some people are concerned. They've raised with me that maybe handmade matzah, could there be concern for corona being transferred? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. But I haven't heard from any professionals that that's so. But I don't know. I'm not a professional in this field. But the advantage of machine-made matzah that Rabbi Soloveitchik really did like was that the process was so quick that the possibility for chametz occurring was so much smaller than it is for handmade matzah. So, and again, maybe some people like the taste of machine-made matzah better. It all depends. But the reason I'm raising this is that for some reason, if someone cannot get their handmade matzah that they normally would get, and they're going to use machine-made matzah for their Seder or for Pesach, they don't have to do Hataras Nedarim. And similarly, the other way around. If normally they have, for some reason, machine-made matzah, and they can't get a hold of that, but they only can get a hold of it, handmade matzah for some reason, they don't have to do Hataras Nedarim. That's number one. The same thing with regard to shmura versus non-shmura. Shmura matzah is something we're very careful about, that it should be shamur, it should be watched from the time of ketzira. That's the ideal, from the time of harvesting, that no water got on it. But technically speaking, if someone cannot get a hold of shmura matzah, they can use non-shmura matzah even for the Seder, provided that it somehow indicated that it was made l'shem mitzvahs matzah. There has to be somehow some type of l'shem mitzvahs matzah on it, whether it's by machine or by hand. But it has to be something l'shem mitzvahs matzah. If they didn't make it l'shem mitzvahs matzah, then one is very hard pressed to say that one is yotzei. But again, even if someone is forced into a situation where they're using non-shmura, they don't have to do Hataras Nedarim, because these are very unique circumstances, and it's not like this is just like they've changed their mind. It's understood that this is very extreme circumstances. Any question in that regard, with regard to the matzot?
Yeah, the matzah which is sold, which is 18 minutes, and it says shmura, but it's machine made. Is that permissible for the Seder?
It's shmura matzah that's machine made.
Yeah, and it's also chai regaim, less than
that's
18
wonderful.
minutes.
That's wonderful.
But who knows if, it's the regular, matzot Yerushalayim, it costs more than the normal matzah, but it's not handmade.
It's fine. Machine-made matzah that's shmura. That's 18-minute. What's known as 18-minute matzah. Less than 18 minutes. It's called late. It's 18 minutes matzah. I mean, it was done under 18 minutes. It's fine. It's wonderful. It sounds very good.
Rav Schreiber, I looked it up. The CDC says that there's a very low risk that the virus will be spread over food surfaces or food packaging surfaces if they've been handled over a period of days or weeks, or frozen or stored at low temperatures.
That's great to know. Sam, thank you so much. Thank you. So are there any more questions about the matzah, the handmade matzah, the machine-made matzah, shmura and non-shmura?
Rav Schreiber, do you hear me?
Yes.
Do you hear me? This is Izzy.
Izzy, hello.
Hi. Getting back to what the previous, not the last guy, the young guy, the other person asked you about the 18-minute matzahs. Was he talking about he talked about matzah Yerushalayim. So they make an 18-minute matzah, which is in a green box, and they make a shmura, machine shmura, which is in a red box. So you have to distinguish between the two. The one that only says on an 18-minute matzah is only an 18-minute matzah, but it's not shmura. Only the one in the red box that says shmura can be that. Only that you can use as shmura, not the 18-minute one.
Correct. He from what I understood from the question, it indicated on the box that it was shmura matzah.
Okay, so it has to be the red box. The red box for Matzah Jerusalem is the one that says shmura.
I'll go take a look at this. You give me about 30 seconds. I can check the color.
It's just going to say 18-minute. It's not. Doesn't say shmura.
Okay, I'll let you know in a minute.
I've been using it for years.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I want to move on to the Seder night. On the Seder night, so typically we say Hallel after Mariv. And many say Hallel even with a bracha. This is done b'tzibur. The question is, when we're not davening b'tzibur, do we say that Hallel at all? Do you say it with a bracha? Rav Schechter is quoted in the name of the Rav that it's specifically a din in Sibur, and no Hallel should be said. I saw that Rabbi Willig basically said that he understood that lahalacha, one can do any of the three possibilities: either not say Hallel without a bracha, or say Hallel with a bracha. And he felt that all of them were acceptable and yesh amal esmoch in each of those cases. From what I understand of the sugya, I would probably end up either not saying it or saying it without a bracha. I still have to think about that a little bit more, but I don't know. I don't know about saying it with a bracha in this case. Right now, I don't feel. If Rabbi Soloveitchik felt not that way, I feel very hard pressed saying it with a bracha, certainly. Now, someone had asked me about if someone's having the Seder by themselves, they may feel challenged to have the extensive normal Seder. Or if for some reason, just the way the family dynamics are working out this year, if it's hard to have an extended Seder, what is the shortest Seder in terms of Haggadah that one can have? What is the shortest amount that one could say? Again, this is b'di'evet. If it's a shasat chak, if one really needs to do this, if it's pressing circumstances, one can do the following. Okay, I'm going to say over basically the shortest amount that you could do. Basically, you would start from halach ma'anya and go until hareze mishubach in the Haggadah. And then you skip until mitchila and you go until the tzach adash be'achav. And then you skip until Rabban Gamliel, and you start with Rabban Gamliel, and you end at Ga'al Yisrael. And that would be the conclusion of your Magid. And in this way, you can have a more swift Magid and then begin Shulchan Aruch. Now, someone had asked me about vegetarians. I don't know if this is a necessarily question only for this year, but certainly is a question that is relevant for all years. Someone had asked if someone's a vegetarian or a vegan. So then the question is, can they find another way for the ka'ara to instead of using, let's say, a cooked shank bone, or a neck, can they use vegetables or other things, or normally we use, let's say, a shank bone or a neck and an egg. So I just want to share with you very, very quickly. There's a Gemara in Pesachim Daf Kuf Yadalad Amud Beis. The Gemara says, "Mai shnei tavshilin." What are the two cooked foods that you put on your ka'ara? So the Gemara says, "Amar Rav Huna silka va'aruza," cooked beets and cooked rice. And then it says that Rava have a mahadar asilka va'aruza. And that's what Rava would do. Because Rav Huna said it, he says, "Ho v'nafik mipumi de Rav Huna." Since Rav Huna said it, so Rava did it. And that's what he had. But the Gemara continues a little bit later on. It says, Rav Yosef amar tzorach shnei mini basar. You dafke need two types of meat. Echad zeichel the Pesach, ve'echad zeichel the Chagiga. Ravina amar afilu gramo bishula. Okay, fine. So the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah bring down that we use two pieces of one of meat and an egg. The meat, the neck, or the shank bone is for zeichel the Pesach, the carbon Pesach, and the egg is zeichel to the carbon Chagiga. But the question is, if a person is a vegan or a vegetarian, I would definitely think that yesh amal l'smoch for them to use cooked beets. If there's Sephardi, they can add cooked rice for the carbon Chagiga. Ashkenazim would use some other vegetable that's cooked, cooked carrots or something like that.
Is it possible to use fish?
Yes, fish also is another possibility. The Gemara says the Shulchan Aruch brings down that as a possibility as well.
Okay, listen. Can you see this for a second?
Or the Gemara mentions fish.
Okay, can I just interrupt for a second? I have this matzah that we were talking about before. I don't know if you get a picture of it.
Yeah, I see it's the red box.
It's sort of red. It has a red stripe.
Yeah.
And it's matzah shmura, chayir gaim, and it has all the qualifications. You said that's okay for the...
Yes, that's wonderful.
Okay.
It's wonderful. I also realized some people had asked, I don't know if it's being recorded or not. Is there any way to start the recording now? I'm not sure if it was recorded.
Yeah, I think you can just...
It's being recorded.
It's being recorded. Okay, wonderful. Okay, Estee, thank you. Thank you so much. Now, the next question I would like to deal with regard to the Seder is having the Seder alone. Just, again, this is not from a halachic perspective, even though I just talked about how short the Magid could be. I talked about the Ka'ara. But I just want to make a comment if someone is having the Seder by themselves, to realize that, number one, it's brought down explicitly in Chazal and it's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch and the Poskim that the mitzvah of Pirsumei Nisa and Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim is even to misaper to oneself, and that is recognized. Apparently, it did occur. It's occurred in history where people have to have the Seder by themselves, and so you tell yourself the story. Sometimes it's important to tell yourself the story, and in order to relive that story, and even if you could relive it in your mind, sometimes telling yourself something has much more power than just thinking about it. So there is a mitzvah to tell oneself the story. It's explicitly brought down in the Rambam and in Poskim. I also want to mention that one should realize that even if one is having the Seder by themselves, they should also realize that we're all together. We are all thinking of one another. I would really hope that one, especially this year, that the Am Yisrael is thinking of one another. I'm thinking of the world generally also. But we're for sure thinking about Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, and we are all together. And even if one is physically in one space just by themselves, but we are together. And just please bear that in mind.
Excuse me, with respect to the recording, just one interjection. With respect to the recording, will it be available, accessible somehow, either sent by email or maybe too big to go through Gmail?
Estee, would it be possible to send it out? What would be the method?
I'm sure it will be. I'm not sure. I'll ask someone who knows that kind of thing, and we'll send it out.
Okay, so that we'll clarify that, and we'll be able to send it out, Bezrat Hashem.
I think it might be possible to add a link to the video in the Facebook event.
Okay,
And
Mari,
we'll take
thank
care
you.
of it after this year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it'll be good to be able to review what was covered.
One more item with regard to having the Seder alone, and that is a suggestion was made, and the truth is, this is not just for people having Seder alone, but people who were going to be together with the at the Seder. My parents are here online. We were going to be together, and we'll certainly be together on our thoughts and minds and hearts. But one thing that some have mentioned, and I think it's a beautiful idea, is that to daven mincha gedola, to daven the earliest mincha one can, and then have a seder on the afternoon prior to the seder, okay, and through Zoom or Skype, together with your loved ones or with your friends, and in this way, at least, again, you're not actually having a regular seder, but you're going through the Haggadah and discussing ideas together, and in this way, at least one can get some sense of sharing the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim and the Seder experience together to the best that we can. Does anyone have any other ideas in this regard?
Okay. Rav, can I ask a question about the davening on Seder night? Is it possible, since unfortunately we have to all kind of daven alone this year, is it possible because of young kids to actually bring Yom Tov in early, but still at Seit to make Kiddush, basically saving perhaps 15 minutes of davening, and then of course only starting the Seder itself at Seit, but having already davened Mariv?
Right. From what I understand, bringing in Yontif early would be fine, and davening early would be fine. But as you said, the Seder has to be started on Tesvav Nisan, so it would have to be from after Tzedek Kachavim, L'chol Hadeos. So I would, but you're right. It would save some time. You would save some time in that regard, because you'll be able to start the Seder right away at Seder instead of being delayed. Yeah, I think that could be a very good idea.
Thank you.
Rav Schreiber?
Yes.
If we're already talking about tefillah, I was wondering, since we will not be davening with a minyan on the first day of Pesach, when we say tefillah tal, what is the procedure for saying that by yourself?
For tal, basically, you begin at Musaf. You would just start saying tal, Morid HaTal. That's what you do. Even though there hasn't been a formal announcement by the Gabbai or by the Shliach Tzibur, the halacha is that you just begin say Morid HaTal in Musaf. And then at Mincha, if your normal minhag is not to say Morid HaTal, you don't mention it, then you would continue at Mincha without saying it. And if your minhag is to say Mashiv HaRuach or Morid HaTal, depending on the time of year, so for Morid HaTal, you would have to, if you do say Morid HaTal, normally in your davening you continue at Mincha as well, but you would insert it already and say it at Musaf.
Yes, so the entire actual Tefillah Tal itself is only with a Shlich Tzibur, you're saying?
Yeah, that whole tefillah, correct. You don't say that whole tefillah. You just would insert the Morid HaTal into your Shemona Esrei. Correct. Okay, that tefillah is reserved for tzibur. I want to now move on, if I may, to the issue of gebrochts. Again, this relates to the Seder. There are some people who are makbid not to eat gebrochts. Gebrochts means a broken matzah. In Hebrew, you would call it matzah shruya, a soaked matzah. Typically, it was broken matzah that you put into something, like into soup. So even though really ikar hadin, halachic wise, there really is no problem eating gebrochts or matzah shruya. There are some people, as I mentioned, particularly in the Hasidic world, who don't. And if for some reason on Leil HaSeder, or if for this Pesach, they're going to need to eat gebrochts, for some reason, let's say eating by people, let's say that's where they are. It's permissible for them to eat gebrochts, and they do not have to do Hataras Nadarim if it's necessary for them. Okay, if it's something that's a Shas HaTzorach and a Shas HaTchak for them, and it's necessary for them to do, they may eat the gebrochts. They're not changing their minhag. This is, again, a unique set of circumstances. It's extreme set of circumstances, and there's no need for Hataras Nadarim. Obviously, God willing, next year it'll be everything will be normal and back to the way things were in terms of these issues, and they will go back to not eating gebrochts if according to their minhag. But that's very, very important to understand that if someone is in such a situation, they can be makel if necessary. I want to also raise the same question with kitniot. With regard to kitniot, again, Ashkenazim do not eat kitniot, and we don't eat kitnios this year either. There is no reason under any normal circumstances of one's home that one should all of a sudden be eating kitnios. Obviously, if someone's sick, and when I say sick, they don't even need to be a chole she'en bo sakana. They don't have to be bedridden. If they're sick, they just do not feel well. They really don't feel well, but they're not to the point where they're bedridden. They are technically permitted to eat kitniot. If they have no other food, let's say you have a healthy person, but there's no other food, and this is for some reason there was a food shortage, they couldn't get food. They couldn't get out, whatever it is, then of course they would be permitted to eat kitniot. That wasn't where the minhag was in place, but it would have to be a tremendous shas hadchak. We Ashkenazim are not going to eat kitniot this year, God willing, if everything's well and good for them and they have other food. Then they shouldn't be makel on this. But one of the questions that's raised is, what about mixtures? You sometimes there are these processed foods, baked goods that say la'ochli kitniot bilvad. The kasher lePesach, but la'ochli kitniot bilvad, only for people who eat kitnios. Sometimes there's a very small amount of kitnios, and kitnios is really, can be, according to many poskim, batal barov. There's great reason to assume that, even though many Ashkenazim are noheg not to rely on that in practice, but under difficult circumstances and pressing circumstances, if someone doesn't have enough food and they need to rely on that, there is what to rely on for that heter, provided that the kitniot is batel at the very least barov, and majority is against the kitniot. You may have to speak to a kashrus expert just to verify if that's indeed so. Let's say you're eating at Ashkenazim are, let's say, eating by Sfardim. Let's say that's where they are for Pesach. Then, so obviously Sfardim, many of them eat kitniot. But what would an Ashkenazi do? An Ashkenazi cannot eat kitniot. But from the kalim, one is allowed to eat from the kalim. And the kalim can be used to cook non-kitniot kosher Pesach food, obviously. But the right thing to be done in this case is that the kalim should not have been used for kitnios in the last 24 hours. When it was being cooked, it should not have been used for kitnios. That is the proper thing. Even though there are three opinions, Rav Avad Yosef is of the opinion that an Ashkenazi lechatchila can eat from the food, even though the kli was used recently within the 24 hours for the kidneyot to be cooked with kidneyot. There are some who are more machmir, don't allow it at all. But the proper approach, the more correct approach would be to wait 24 hours. So if one can organize that, then they can do that. If for some reason there's no other way to do this, you're at a Sephardi's home, and for some reason there's no way, you don't have the food that will be available is only food that will have been cooked in a pot that was used in the last 24 hours for kidneyos. Yesh amal l'smoch in that case. But again, kidneyos should not be served to that person. Any questions on this topic?
Okay. Yeah, Rabbi.
Hi.
As you know, hi, Rabbi. As you know, I'm celiac, so I can't eat half of the stuff that's being served. So what do I do about kidneyot?
For you, it's not really going to be an issue, and for sure this year. If there is no other food available for you, you will be allowed to eat the kidneyot. Absolutely. If there isn't other food in your case that's available for you to enjoy and to be healthy and well, then you'll be able to eat kidneyos.
All right. Thanks, Rabbi.
Okay. You're welcome. Okay, I think we've come to some of all the basic questions. If I may, I just want to discuss one last topic, and that is, in general, the Ikar Hadin, when it comes to food. If the food is kosher lePesach, if it says kosher lePesach on it, and it's a Ikar Hadin, on the basic level, it is kosher. Okay, and again, whether it's for Sephardim and it says la'ochle kitnios, or for Ashkenazim and it's not la'ochle kitnios, but it's a basic hechsher, and one needs that food. It's not just that they have a yetzer hara for the food; they need the food. In general, this year, and I'm saying it for this year, even though one's standards may be mahadrin and the like, it's been widely nifsak lahalacha that one can be mekel. Bizman hazeh, in this particular circumstance. I know people have been talking about Zoom on Pesach for the Seder. I'm sure you've heard all the different opinions. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I would say that there are many halachic problems that are at stake here, meta halachic problems, and slippery slope issues, and atmosphere questions, and in certain senses, sometimes sacrificing, the whole atmosphere of Seder for something that is something that's just very nice, would seem very nice, but is actually a real violation of the atmosphere of the day. It's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's my opinion. It's the opinion of many Gedolei Yisrael not to do this, and I would really urge people not to go in that direction, but to do it, as I mentioned, Erev Pesach, in the afternoon, to do prior to the Seder, get together with friends or family, and do this. Obviously, if there's a question, kanat nefashot and pikuach nefesh involved, that's for a particular shaila to be raised in a particular case, not for this forum, but I'd be more than happy to address that on any particular cases that come up.
Any recommended topics for that pre-Seder, Rav Schreiber?
I would go through Magid. The way sometimes people on Shabbos Hagadol go over the Seder with their family. So maybe that would be a perfect example or a perfect time to do Magid in this way. Maybe just to add to it, dress up Lagamri, like Yontif, for those who wear a kittel, to wear kittel, have this, have the table all set, and include the table, in the Zoom, so as much as possible to capture some of the ambiance that will occur on Leil HaSeder. Does anyone have any other ideas? That's a great idea. I mean, that's a good question. Anyone else have any other ideas for that good question?
Well, I think that this year is special, of course, and we're all alone in a sense, and we're all in the same boat in another sense. So I think the fact that we all sort of sharing the same fate this year brings us together, even though we're alone or just in small company.
Absolutely. It's something we should all keep in mind and together on Leil HaSeder. Absolutely. So if there are no other questions, I would just want to wish everyone good health.
Rav, can I ask one last question? I apologize.
Absolutely.
About kashrut. I didn't want to interrupt you at the beginning. I know there are a lot of important topics. Is it possible to do libun on the grates of a stove by putting it inside the self-cleaning oven?
Absolutely. If it's a self-cleaning oven and you put those grates inside, it is considered libun.
Okay, great. Thank you. Chag Sameach.
Rav Schreiber?
Yes?
Rav Schreiber?
I also have a question. A platter, is it enough to just cover it with heavy aluminum foil, or and then use it on Pesach, or do I have to turn it on also?
With the platter, clean the surface of the platter very well. Turn it on, plug it in, and have it on for an hour. And then, first wait 24 hours, then turn it on for an hour. Afterwards, cover it with at least 2 layers of strong silver foil, of aluminum foil.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Rav Schreiber, can I ask, is it possible to do Hagala at home properly? If you want to do Hagalas Kalim gloves, there won't be any public ones this year.
Right.
Thinking about doing it seems like it's something quite difficult to actually do safely and properly at home.
It is possible to do it at home and to do it well, but I do agree with you that it's challenging and there are issues of safety, and where one could avoid it and use something that's a chad pa'ami, a throwaway, to buy, let's say, aluminum. There are these throwaway aluminum pots, like aluminum foil pots. That would be better. But if one needs to, it can be done. I basically feel that maybe the best way to do this is either in person. I could speak with people directly, but I think even better than that is there's I've written something up and I have some other literature on how to do Hagala at home that I would send to Estee Yaari, and she could send it out to everyone on this group. Or if you want, you can email me, but I think more direct ways through Estee, and you can have that literature sent to you, and it would walk you through it. And I would be happy to answer any questions, though, obviously, if anyone needs to follow up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One more question, if you don't mind. In terms of Biur Chametz, you mentioned, I think, that you can take, for example, bread out and just throw it out somewhere. Is it possible just to give it to the birds, make it essentially hefker and the birds take it away? In other words, not really destroying the chametz, it's just taking it out of your reshut.
Well, right. So what I would say in that case, that to disperse it, basically crumble it and disperse it in a reshut harabim, in a public area that's an ownerless area, and if the birds eat it, fine. But it shouldn't be done in your yard or your merpeset or something like that. It shouldn't be in your private space, but it should be done in a public domain or an ownerless domain, if you prefer to do it that way.
Well, I was thinking about the roof. Now the roof of the building, it's not my reshut, but it's reshut meshutefet. In other words, It's belongs to the whole building. In that case, it's the questionable point here.
Yeah, I would say again, it shouldn't be a place that's if it's multi-owned, then it means that you still own it. So you have to do it in a place that is that's a public area, that's ownerless. Or alternatively, as I said, you could flush it down the toilet. But in this, obviously you want to finish up as much chametz as possible, or throw out whatever chametz you can as early as possible, and just the chametz that you have from the bedikas chametz that you will save for the end, and that you will either flush down the toilet or disperse to the birds.
But I think if you try to flush too much down the toilet, you're going to wind up calling the plumber before you enter.
Yes, I agree. It should be crumbled into small pieces and only a small amount. The bulk of it should be eaten or thrown out way earlier.
Rav Schreiber, regarding the question about bringing in Yom Tov early, should a person be careful, similar to if they're going to bring in early Shabbos, to daven mincha before plag, so that they're holding Rabbi Yehuda for both the time of end of mincha and also for if they're going to daven marav early before shkia? Should they be careful to do that?
Absolutely. One should definitely do that. Thank you very, very much. One to daven before mincha before plag, which is an hour and a quarter before shkia, and then they can daven marav afterwards. But to daven mincha after plaga mincha and then to daven marav gets into a serious question of what's known as a tarti desatre, that's what you're referring to, and it's a serious question. So if I can, I'd just like to wish everybody really good health. Please stay well and stay healthy to you and your family and friends, and to Kol Klal Yisrael and to the world all over. And we should be zochet for a Chag Kosher, v'sameach, and just good news, b'sorot tovot. And like we know, very difficult things happen very, very quickly, and they took us by surprise. But as well, we all know that wonderful things and good things can happen also very quickly and take us by surprise. And we should hope. Kaveh el Hashem, chazak v'metzlibecha, v'kaveh el Hashem. So good to see you all. And
Thank you very much, Rav Schreiber. Thank you, everybody.
Very welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rav Schreiber.
Very welcome.
Chag Sameach, Chag Kasher v'Sameach.
Chag Kasher v'Sameach. So good to see you, Mitch. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Is it possible to do a shiur during Pesach?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
Would it be possible to do a shiur during Pesach?
It's
like this.
I mean, over Chol HaMoed to do some type of shiur. I would be willing. If it's possible, I'm willing to learn together over Chol HaMoed. I'd be more than happy to. If we'll speak to Estee, and maybe if there is interest, I'd be more than happy to.
Great.
Let me just make a suggestion, since we see that Zoom works very well for us. Maybe we could arrange to have the shiur more often than once a month, because there's a certain degree of freedom here that we didn't know existed.
That's true. That is true, Mitch. That is absolutely so. Okay, I am more than happy to consider that. I like that idea very, very much.
Much easier parking.
Yes. It's very true. Thank you for that suggestion. That's a great one.
Chag Kasher v'Sameach to everybody.
Take care, Murray. Take care,
everybody.
Take care, Mitch. Kol tov. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Daddy. Estee, thank you so much.
L'simcha.
It was great. It worked out really, really well. And who knows? Maybe it'll create, something, greater learning over the course of the year because of this.
Be'ezrat Hashem.
Thank you. It's Kila Mitzvot. Okay, so we'll.
Rav Schreiber, are you aware that we had more than 40 people for most of the shiur?
Really? Okay, that's really great to hear. That is so nice. I see friends of mine also here. Josh Hexter's there, and some people, Benji Singer, and a number of other wonderful people. It's so good to see you. I see my nephew Chanan and others, and my wife is online. I see, but it's been really, really nice. Thank you very, very much, and it's great. Murray, thanks for noting that. Estee, I wanted to also ask, there are probably a few things that people are going to ask about with regard to the shiur. They're going to ask about the recording. They're going to be asking about the link to the tefillah, to selling their kelim through the Mechon Summit, and also maybe for direction about Hagalat and Libun kelim. Is there any way through this to find out like how to send it to them? Like, do you have a record of their